All good with the stream to YouTube?
Yep, we are live.
Awesome. All right. Call to order this special meeting of the Joint Policy Committees, July 24th, 2020 at 9:06 a.m. First item is the approval of minutes from the July 10th meeting. These minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Next item.
And Gwen abstains.
I
Yes.
abstain, yeah.
Yes, three yeses and one abstention. Next item, the 7/17/2020 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved. Thank you. Next agenda
Minor
item.
technicality, just
Yes.
minor, my legal name is Pearson Ugal.
My apologies.
It's okay.
Thank you. Is it
Well, that's good.
hyphenated?
It is not hyphenated.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Next item, public comment. Any public comment? I believe we have a couple of members of the public joining us today. If you would like to, if you would like to, I'm just going to allow. Yep, you're already allowed to unmute yourself, so you should be able to do that. And feel free to speak up now if you would like to make a public comment. That is for KLT and Dave Kennedy.
If we could just have KLT identify themselves by name to avoid this in case they speak later.
Sure. Okay. All right. So nothing now. All right. Moving along. Our next item is committee member comment. Moving along. Okay, so we have three policy items that we wanted to touch on today. The first one being the distance learning policy identified as P6172.61. We started this, and I have that here. We started looking at this last time we, no, I'm sorry, not last time we met, but the time before that. And we paused on that. Right. So I guess, no, that's not right at all. Sorry. We stopped on July 17th. So last time.
Which was last week, but it feels like a month ago.
It does feel like a month ago. Thank you. So we stopped here because I think we were running out of time and we wanted to make sure that we could at least advance the face mask and coverings policy to the boards. So this is where we got to. So I think we're at special education when we wrapped last time. Consistent with the process that we've used before, we generally go through and look for comments that members have made before this meeting so that we have an opportunity to sort of touch on those items that people have already reviewed. But given the nature of these particular items, sort of outside of the regular 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 series, I can imagine that possibly Dr. Pearson Ugal has not had an opportunity to review these or somebody else on the committee hasn't. So I want to give people the opportunity to speak up if there's anything in particular you want to go through in detail.
Well, I think we have sort of the foundational question of how detailed is this policy going to be and how high level is it going to be for the purpose of establishing a policy for distance learning as opposed to a protocol. Right.
Yeah. And I think would you mind just riffing on that for a bit, sort of protocol versus policy?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a function of the policy should theoretically exist for the purpose of defining what distance learning is, who has the authority to implement it, what that looks like in a broad framework. Not so much, I think, we've already taken out, I think, some of the language that drilled down a little deeper, like the school nutritional benefits, that the language was very specific about what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and how it needs to happen, which is all A, partially subject to the discretion of the administration, and B, subject to other policies that detail school nutrition anyway. And there's a risk of creating conflicts if we start editing one but not the other.
Right. Good. Okay. And I think to that point, I think the last time we met, we had skinnied this down to say essentially during an extended distance learning period, the district shall continue to comply with all federal and state food service requirements.
Right, because it had all sorts of specific rules in there that we weren't comfortable imposing.
Right. Okay. Very good. So looking here, I'm just going to clear
So can I
that.
And I think we're
just-
about to have the same conversation about special ed that we had about school nutrition when we decided to just
Yeah.
pause.
So is the Dave Kennedy who's present on the call, our Dave Kennedy who's with Chartwells? And if so, does he want to weigh in regarding that statement about school nutrition? Since he does oversee.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we
Morning,
can.
Dave.
So it is the Dave Kennedy. As far as the school nutrition benefits, that what you explained before is pretty much what you have to do. And then if there is a total closure, then you have to wait for the USDA and the state to do what they did before and allow us to have certain waivers for food service. So I don't know if that helped you out, but I mean, like everything, we're still waiting for the USDA to give us other compliance issues, but we're just going to do business as usual. But this definitely, we do have to follow USDA and the Connecticut State Department of Education policies.
So this more has to do with the executive orders and how that affects governance in
Correct.
various ways.
Yes. So
Okay.
with that, when we had this before, we sat down and we did speak with the state. So that's how we were doing the different food service that other school districts have done. So.
I mean, do we want to say to sort of conform to that during an extended distance learning period, the distance shall comply with all federal and state service requirements as may be amended or suspended by those authorities? Or something to that effect?
That makes sense. I think we want to distinguish between distance learning with a capital D and a capital L, which is
Mhm.
the all-out model, and the temporary learning from home. So obviously, we're not providing food service to families who choose to keep their
Right.
children at home
Just-
temporarily.
Can you remind me, John, by going up, is distance learning defined at the top of this?
A distance
Yeah.
learning, capital D, capital L day is a remote school day where students and staff have an opportunity to explore and engage. So right here.
Yeah, just to make sure that that can't be construed to be inclusive of temporary learning from home.
Right. I think we would need to add something here. I think there's something about that and we actually touch on it here, an extended distance learning period. What we meant by that was the school has closed.
Mhm.
There is a
not
full
people have
close that is
opted.
more than a couple days. Yeah.
Right. And Stephanie, what would your opinion be related to a hybrid model?
No, I mean, in the hybrid model, the school is still functioning. So
But if I
But-
am on remote days, Monday,
Exactly.
Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'm in
If I'm
school
on
Thursday,
B-track.
Friday, am I entitled to lunch Thursday, Friday, or am I entitled to lunch Monday through Friday?
Right.
you might be. I mean, so if
Yeah.
we're just compliant with state and national law, then students who participate in the free and reduced lunch program would have access to meals that they would typically have at school.
I think that's right.
It was much broader during our full closure because we did provide food to students under 18
Mhm.
on a regular schedule,
Broadly.
which essentially
Would-
provided them food for the whole week.
Would the hybrid model be basically if you're there Monday, Tuesday, when you leave on Tuesday, you get 4 box meals to carry you through the other 2 days, or 6 meals?
Potentially.
Because I think that's probably preferable to having them come back on days where the other people are there for the sole purpose of collecting meals.
And frankly, just logistically, I'm not sure it's fair to our families to expect them to be able to come. I mean, I'm not sure this is policy related, but
Yeah.
if people have gone back to work, how do they get in to pick up the meals? It's a little bit more complicated than it was in the spring.
Right. I think the point is that we're trying to avoid the policy covering voluntary opt-outs for temporary learning at home, and also not step on our legal obligations under the lunch program.
So is it adequate to simply say that we're going to continue to comply? And if compliance means that we're providing to those families, then we do
Yeah,
so.
I think that's fine,
Yeah.
as long as then in that first paragraph, distance learning day can't be construed to include temporary learning from home.
What if we said something like during any required extended distance learning period, or somehow indicate that this is not just optional or mandatory?
I would just change the definition up top where it
Yeah,
says a distance learning day is,
Okay.
and then you could say at the end, even at the end of that paragraph, distance
Okay.
learning is, shall not include voluntary temporary learning from home, because it might not even be voluntary.
Good.
Then you get
Okay,
into the
so-
question of if somebody is quarantined at home, are they entitled to lunches? Probably,
Yeah.
Possibly.
because they're no longer voluntarily opting out.
Right.
Possibly.
I think what we're
that's
trying
where
to
we're gonna
do-
need to get more guidance.
Right. We're trying to make a policy when we don't know.
Distance learning day is a remote school day where students and staff. Is it? I mean, in that scenario, staff wouldn't necessarily be required. I think you could say
Yeah.
students and/or staff.
And
Right,
also,
because-
where it
yeah.
says having an opportunity, that makes it sound a little optional,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Right. Are engaged. Well, it says to explore and engage.
Yeah,
I'm not
but-
sure explore and engage is actually, I mean.
I don't think so either.
Will be engaged.
Shall,
Right.
will be engaged or shall.
I think there are a few components. One component is that there's some compulsory, sort of piece of it, right? That they either are required because everything's closed, or they're on a hybrid track, they're on the B and they're out for those days, or they're sick and must quarantine, right? Some kind of compulsory piece to it.
Yes.
And then, the other part is, they're learning from a distance, right? And this is just language to say that.
So
Right,
will be engaged or shall.
Yeah,
be engaged?
I don't think that we need to say aligned to the curriculum, connected to standards, relevant. Like, this is not the place. Oh no, it is. It absolutely
kind of
is.
is. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I agree with A,
Yeah.
B, and C.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with it too. And I'm sorry, I was being very, sort of myopic about the nutrition's benefits is the main thing I was thinking about.
Instead of opportunity, shall engage.
Or you could just use the word will.
Will engage, shall
Will
engage.
implies a voluntariness and
Okay.
shall implies a compulsion, but
Okay.
Or shall.
you really want to be, I mean,
Yeah,
you
you gotta
really did
explore.
want the compulsory element of this addressed, I thought, but
Yeah.
not a student opting out, a student required to be out for whatever.
And if I think the adjective, sort of including meaningful here, I think we could delete it and say A, B, and C are helping to
Yeah.
flesh that out.
Right, that all makes it meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall engage in
meaningful
learning
seems
experience that-
awfully subjective to me.
Yeah. Right.
So just to go back to the point about being quarantined, if a student needed to be quarantined, they would not be participating in the distance learning with a capital D and a capital L. They would be participating in the temporarily learning from home, which is a whole other story in terms
Because
of.
it wouldn't be a distance learning day at all, because the school wouldn't be closed.
Correct.
Because a distance learning day does not really cover the hybrid model at all,
Yeah.
because we're never actually fully in a distance posture at that point.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think a hybrid model is, I mean, at least the way that we've laid it out, it's 2 days in person, 3 days distance. And that's not like you have a choice about it, students,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it is, those are that I think hybrid is by definition, both in person and distance learning. And I think
So-
when they're, yeah.
So I guess that's where distance learning day is, if you're in the hybrid and your names are this, it's Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. But then that's where, when we talked about school nutrition benefits, we talked about extended distance learning period. That gives you that's only a full closed section.
Mhm.
Yes, I mean, what you stated right here is accurate. So the hybrid is a combination of both. And for the portion of the hybrid week that's in a distance learning setup, this statement about distance learning is accurate.
Could we say a distance learning day is a planned and required remote school day? Because that eliminates snow days as,
Well, we already
Is
say it's
James-
health-based. The whole policy is on health-based school closures. We
okay.
had this discussion last week about how broad to make this.
I mean, it's funny because I'm realizing, like, as I looked up in the upper left corner and saw the title and went, oh, we are defining that. And I think we need to. I don't think we can punt on this. I think we have to be very clear about what the heck a distance learning capital D, capital L day is.
I think what you've stated is accurate. I think if you add too much detail to it, you could be boxing us in.
Yeah, I agree. This right now, a distance learning day is a remote school day where students and staff shall engage in learning experiences that are
Based on
aligned to the
health
curriculum.
concerns.
Yeah, I think exactly. Like, are we including capital D, capital L snow days?
No.
I
No,
wouldn't
right?
put in the health concerns because then I think that people will infer that means when they have to quarantine or be home for any other reason, just because of a health concern. And during that time, they would not be participating in the sort of full distance learning.
What about
Based
public
on local
health?
and, based on local
Exactly.
and state requirements, based on local and state guidance.
Local and state public health guidance requires
Sounds
remote
good.
school days.
Okay.
Sure. As informed by,
Mhm.
If the guidance is optional
Mhm.
or suggestive as opposed to requires,
Yeah,
that might box us in.
then,
Hopefully we don't have to confront that.
well, but if it is
Where
optional,
have
I
you been
think
the
that's
past 4
right.
months?
I think that if it's optional, who's going to be making the choices, right? Is it school board and superintendent? Like, imagine the scenario.
Right, who's calling a distance learning day?
That's right. And is
Yeah.
it, let's imagine that the state says, everyone, you're closed.
so
Who-
according to our current full reopening plan, a
Mhm.
distance learning day is triggered by the guidance of local Department of Health informed by current health conditions. So that's what determines currently in our full reopening plan. That's what determines the movement from one model to another.
Do we want to say that distance learning day is a remote school day triggered by da 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 da, where students and staff shall engage in
Maybe not another triggered, but maybe triggered isn't the right word, but something along those lines.
activated?
I think I said that last week and you all laughed at me, so.
I always
like
think
that.
of like a Power Ranger activating when you say
Right.
that. I hate to
Which
say
is why it's a good choice.
Okay, Voltron fans, okay.
not.
Yeah,
Distance
somewhere between informed by and triggered.
yeah.
Determined by?
I like that very much. Determined by local health officials and
Guidance from local health officials. I
Do we
mean,
wanna
the
say-
call actually comes from either at the state level by the governor or by the superintendent informed by the local guidance.
a remote school day determined by guidance from state and local health officials where students and staff shall engage in learning experiences that are A, aligned to the curriculum, B, connected to standards, and C, relevant to the current instructional sequence.
Looks accurate.
It's not the Bill of Rights, but it'll pass, right? Okay. The board directs the administration to develop and implement a distance learning plan to provide continuity of educational services when circumstances require.
Kathy,
I get in trouble for randomly capitalizing things, so now I'm gun shy. Okay. All right. All right. So with that understood, during extended distance learning period.
And extended distance learning.
Yeah, thank you. Even Google knows that. The district shall continue to comply with all federal and state food services requirements as may be amended or suspended by appropriate authorities. Now, do we need to say that since we've already set up here? Oh, no, I think we do need to say that because I think to Dave Kennedy's point, USDA and others have something to say about the specifics of food and nutrition benefits.
and it's a little specific too, also in terms of our participation in the National School Lunch Program, which is
Yes.
not necessarily true across the whole state.
Right. Okay. Everyone comfortable moving forward?
Mhm.
Awesome. Special education.
I think we should endeavor to do something similar for the
Yeah.
special education paragraph and synthesize it down as much as we can to 1 to 2 paragraphs that says that distance learning shall not impede the obligation to provide FAPE, and efforts will be made to ensure that IEP requirements continue to be fulfilled to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah,
Under the
I mean,
circumstances.
I would recommend keeping A, B, and C, but cutting most of the wording. And
Right, because
then
that's what A, B, and C is getting
the
at.
app or operational.
Okay. So if we try a new A, we are saying,
Students with IEPs or otherwise receive special education services.
Well, that's B, really, right? Students will continue to receive provisions.
I'm trying to sort of combine them
Combine
with,
A and B.
Oh, combine them.
the preface is B, the substance is A.
Right. Well, could you take the first sentence of B and the first sentence of A? And just be done
Yes.
with it?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Oh, I would just stop, yep.
okay, and it's just going to be mean about formatting, but I'm going to fix it. Good, down to
Yep.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, and then we eliminate B and C.
Mhm.
Okay, and
Right. And then the next one has to do with HR, really. I mean, appropriately certified, and we could include that level of detail, but what's now C, D, and E to me are really all operational details.
Right.
okay, C, D, E. Good. Appropriately certified professional staff members will continue. Okay,
I think you could delete the second sentence if you wanted to of B.
Right,
but-
it's already stated above.
Mhm.
And then I think we'll probably end up losing G, H, I, J,
It's,
K.
yes,
Although K seems to possibly be useful with respect to timelines, but
are we, okay, so G, remove.
Yes.
The new G, remove.
Yes.
The new
OG
G,
and UG.
that's right.
yes, because you've said it in the statement above.
Okay.
Right.
Out of district programs.
There you might want to keep some information.
Something.
Okay.
I mean, because, well, I mean, frankly, if you're complying with the IEP and the IEP includes an out-of-district placement, then it's already been stated. But if you think that it's necessary to have something separate that speaks specifically to the out-of-district, then we
I
can
think
make.
it's sort of the goal is to clarify where one is open and the other is closed, what results.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't know off the top of my head whether any other policies address this. Like, do any policies targeted at special services address this question of if one but not the other? You know, am I transporting kids on buses if we're closed but they're not? But I mean, it gets into operational, and we're talking about the we're going to fulfill the IEP.
But we don't know what happens if one school is closed and the other is open.
Yes,
What's
frankly,
always-
we have not been in that situation yet.
The district will collaborate with the out-of-school district placement to offer appropriate meaningful learning activities for completion at home. I mean, do we have an issue with that policy?
I would say appropriate. Meaningful sounds subjective.
Yeah.
Appropriate is
I mean,
a,
this is basically restating the fact that the LEA maintains responsibility for the student's education, whether it's in or out.
I think we're wrestling with the fact that we don't know what would happen in this circumstance. And I don't think we can write a policy when we have not encountered the circumstance, nor anyone has provided any guidance as to what would happen in the
And-
circumstance of one district being closed or one open.
right.
And if we take the
it-
policy, if we remove the policy entirely, then it becomes a function of administrative discretion and, frankly,
Right.
what the PPT decides.
Right.
Well, and the guidance from the state. So I know that there are
Right.
weekly meetings with the area special ed directors and the rep at the state level to provide more guidance in this area. But this statement actually says parents will be required to provide transportation. I'm not sure we can. I don't know that that would be allowed.
You would need some kind of suspension of state
Sure.
law,
Right.
which, I mean, so it's a question for me. The parts of this, we are meant to assume that this is in response to state and federal laws, that's what CABE is doing when they draft this language. That one, there's a big question.
Well, there's a big question because you could be in full distance learning without an executive order.
Right.
So we could locally be in full distance learning without it being, full state. So,
Right. And a kid could be outplaced in New Haven where there's no local health emergency.
correct.
Okay. So it sounds like we are saying that the previous broad statements cover us here. And the reality is that this is an answer that may not be the answer, depending on what law allows at that point.
And I think we might want to take this out entirely here
Mhm.
and think about as an issue that this is sort of just triggered in my mind when we're talking about policy specific to transportation.
Yeah.
Having a cross-reference to the definition of distance learning day.
I think that's
Mhm.
right.
You know, transportation is suspended on full distance learning day, or, some kind of
Right.
indication.
Comment.
So I mean, our current plan includes some flexibility while we are in a hybrid model that will likely include students with IEPs coming into school with greater frequency than 2 days a week.
Right.
So that really has to do with following the IEP and then making appropriate individual decisions. And I think that flexibility is important. And I think that if you spell out exactly what's going to happen for all, could be an issue.
Right. I think we want the policy to provide the framework within which different plans can be operationalized differently as
Yeah.
the circumstances require.
And I think as a rule, like this is something that's scratching at the back of my mind right now is that I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to say we have one policy, we're going to stick to state and federal law, right? That'd be absurd, right? If that was our entire policy document. So I think so I think the reason that we're doing this is to help make it clear how we are going to comply with state and federal law. But in a case like that, where we're seeing an example of a policy that assumes certain changes have been made to state law that, you know, we can't just make that assumption. So I think we have to have a broader statement that's more along the lines of, we will comply with state and local law, state and federal law.
Right. I think part of the purpose of the policy is to establish a distance learning day as a thing that
Yep.
ER9 recognizes.
Right.
This is an
exactly.
option. This is a thing.
That's right.
And so then when we go down, when we start planning for things, we're saying we're engaging in this reopening plan within the framework of a distance learning policy, or we're engaging in this negotiation with
Mhm.
bargaining units within the framework of a distance learning policy that the board is directing.
Right. Okay. So good. Moving on. I do want to touch on, sorry, I just want to make a note, and this is being very mean. I just want it, there we go. Just let me make a note. Fine. Cross-reference policy. So that's just a little to-do for us to keep track of.
Do we want to call them distance learning opportunities, or do we want to call them remote opportunities here? If we talked about remote in the definition of distance learning, because this wouldn't be a capital D, capital L.
You know, are they really opportunities?
Are we saying just
Through
strike the word?
remote, you say through remote instruction, or do you want to say through distance learning?
Through distance learning, period.
Capital D, capital L?
Capital D, capital L.
Okay.
So
Okay.
for referrals and evaluations, from where Chris started to highlight all the way down to the end could be removed.
For G?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're comfortable with H?
I'm just rereading G in its current state.
Mm.
Well, isn't it conflicting first sentence and second will be adhered to, and then make every effort to comply?
Could you say that again, Maureen?
I'm saying that the first and the second sentences of G are conflicting. One
I think the
says,
first one is trying to get at referrals and initial meetings, and the second one is trying to get at evaluations, but it's just not clear.
Right.
so
So
why
the
don't we have one
difficulty here
sentence?
is that if we're in a full closure, there are some, we can't conduct evaluations because we can't do evaluations remotely.
If there's a
So-
referral, you can hold the initial PPT within that time frame by Zoom, but you can't necessarily get an evaluation done within any timeline.
Correct.
So traditional
I find that
timelines
it could be
for
confusing.
referrals or for initial PPTs or something like that will be adhered to.
So for referrals and PPTs?
And in some cases, it depends where we are in the cycle, the IEP annual cycle when we move into distance learning. So in some cases, if a meeting is scheduled and all of the evaluations have been completed and we're going to hold an annual review, that could go on as planned. And then in another case, if all of the evaluations haven't been completed, then you would need to extend them. You would need to extend the
And
So
the
to
same would
the
apply
extent
on training.
practicable,
Sure.
are you comfortable with to the extent practicable?
Yes.
Are we putting that at the after remotely? Or are we putting that within the statutory timelines within the extent practical?
After timelines, I think.
Okay.
Me too.
To the extent practicable?
Yep. i.e. you're going to make every effort, but there are unanticipated, unintended consequences of an awful lot of stuff in this environment.
And that
Doesn't
actually helps to
final
explain the
sentence-
next sentence. I'm sorry.
Doesn't that already,
Yeah.
haven't you already said that?
Exactly. Okay.
Just a quick question, as I read this in conjunction with the whole section, what's the preface to this section? Is it talking about extended distance learning days like the food service one? It probably should, because otherwise we're talking about if there's a single distance learning day, all of this would also apply, which kind of confuses the issue.
Mhm.
So we don't actually have a preface for we just go straight into A, Bs, and Cs. And I think we probably do want something like
During
this.
extended distance learning period, special services shall be provided on the following.
Yeah,
You could
same
actually
language.
just use the same intro and just take out food service.
Mhm.
Right.
Because it could just say federal and state requirements as amended.
Right. Specifically, colon, like,
During an extended distance learning period, the district shall continue to comply with all federal and state requirements as may be amended or suspended by appropriate authorities.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Good. A, the district will provide distance learning. Okay, good. Appropriate, good. We were down to H.
I don't know why here we're talking about things being held by alternate means via like video conferencing or a conference call, whereas in a previous paragraph, we talked about them being held remotely. I mean, we should use the same language, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Well,
Agreed.
and also you've already said that you're going to have meetings, referrals and
Right.
evaluations. So
Well, I think
annual-
they're trying to say G is referrals and evaluations, almost on the initial side.
Mhm.
And then H is annuals and revals on the continuing side. But I'm not sure that we need to make distinctions. We need to say that initial referrals will be met in the timely manner via a remote meeting, because we're going to prioritize making sure those initial PPTs happen. And then when it comes to annual reviews and revals, we're going to do the best we can under the circumstances with the second services.
right. So can we just use the consistent language?
Mhm.
Well, if we change the sort of, instead of just saying referrals and evaluations, if we said initial referrals, evaluations, annual reviews, and reevaluations, and then use the language after that. But I think specifically it's saying once district schools reopen.
Yeah, I would want to have a little bit more input from our special services directors
Yeah.
on that,
So-
because I do think that they were handling different kinds of meetings differently.
Would it be useful if we put we've got open issues. We have a special document for that. Bear with me. It is the Open Policy Committee Open Issues, and we even have an acronym for it, but I forgot what it is. So
EDI or IDE or OB something. I don't know. While we're flagging this,
Yep.
let's take a second to talk about timing and when we want this policy to be enacted. Because if we want to bring this to the hypothetical August 4th tri-board for a first reading so that we can get it in place by September, then perhaps one of the takeaways here is that we get feedback from special services between now and next Friday.
I
Yes,
think that's right.
Yes.
yes, we can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, we're having a changing of the guards in Region 9, but I think we can still do that.
It was very nice of you all to welcome him with a 17-hour meeting the other night.
He seemed enthusiastic, which
We'll fix that.
He hung in.
definitely hung in for the whole thing.
Yeah, that's good. We need that. All right. So moving on, so we're putting a pin there. And now, sorry, my screen is partially covering the comment. Here we go. This looks like it's just a continuation of, and these little sort of, these guys kill me. Bear with me.
Yeah, I mean, the wording isn't consistent because the sort of any extension provided, I mean, if they're talking about an executive order that might come from the governor. I don't know. I mean, certainly if the state is essentially on lockdown, they're not going to be holding due process hearings.
Right, and I mean, I agree this is not perfectly worded, but I get the idea of it. It's that I mean, it's actually very similar to what we had above, where it's.
Although we're not
it's gonna be
driving the due
suspended,
process.
Right, that's
though.
the implication, that we're driving the due process.
We have no
process.
control over that. It's like saying that, you know, in the event of a closure, I promise to sue you as soon as the courts reopen. Like
that, I like that very much. We need that to be in
References
here.
made to state and local law for procedures on due process hearings in the event of a school closure. I mean, it's not our process to determine.
no.
Well, but it's saying, okay, we will comply and operate.
The state's going to tell us when things are due.
Yeah, I think it's extension. I think it's instead of just any extension provided, if we say within the framework provided by the state Commissioner of Education, state statutory requirements.
And what is a due process hearing / activity?
And
What's
that's
it-
a
what's the slash
nonsense
activity?
term. I mean, what does
Yeah.
that mean?
It's made up.
It is?
It doesn't,
Activities?
Okay,
I mean, I think what they're getting at is the process of due process that isn't the hearing itself.
right.
I mean, are they getting at the timeline of due process?
Which we wouldn't control.
Right.
We don't get to choose.
Right,
So
but
why
I
would
think,
we have a policy about a,
but I think the point is to say that we won't have control of it. We'll operate within whatever the guidelines are provided by the state.
the district will comply with all guidelines provided by the state in terms of due process hearings?
Right. Does that work?
Sure.
Sure. I mean, it's a non-policy, but it's whatever.
Right. I mean, because saying that we're going to follow the law is,
Yeah, but we're
Right.
saying that a lot, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Because
I
we
mean,
don't know
I
what the
still
law
believe we
is.
can have a one-page policy
Whatever
book
it
that
might
says
be.
the boards follow the law.
The reality is we don't know what a lot of these state and local laws will be, so we can't drill down on how we would comply or
And-
whether or not we have any leeway to comply.
I
We
think
don't know what they are.
I think that's
Right,
right.
because it's not like the state's giving you an option. You can either participate in due process remotely, or you can wait until we're back in person.
Yeah, and
right. It's outside of our control, honestly.
yes, and I think this policy, this section of policy and the things that we're talking about related to face coverings or sort of other places where we need to be nimble, the policy actually needs to say, we are going to react to the framework that is provided, the process that is provided, or whatever. I think that's smart. In sort of most of the policies, when we're going through the 3000 series, we are reacting to more steady, sort of
Correct.
more sort of established law. And so I think our job is to make it easy for somebody to understand, for the average person to say, what is the process without them having to go read through,
Mhm.
the state law.
So with respect, though, to the face coverings, when we finish with this one, I would like to go back to that for a moment because I've had a number of communications with our medical advisors.
Yep.
That should inform a couple of changes, if
Okay.
not in the policy, certainly operationally.
So we still have a lot to get through on this.
Mhm.
So districts will comply with the process articulated by, right? Something like that.
Mhm.
Guidelines. Sorry. By the Commissioner of Education for all state statutory.
I mean, is it only the Commissioner of Education or would it?
No, I think it's
potentially
by
be
appropriate
other
authorities,
state or
right?
federal authorities?
Mhm, by appropriate authorities.
Yeah.
For ensuring due process. I mean, will that work?
I think it's vague enough. I think it
Yeah.
should be subject to having some more precision, but I really honestly here do not know what we are trying to address and how we're
Yeah.
trying to address it.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so my framework, I don't have one because I don't know
Right.
what I'm trying to respond to.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Any
and-
modifications to the due process shall be directed by state and federal authorities.
Right.
if the point of this small part of the policy is simply to let parents know that it still exists,
Correct.
right? During
That's right.
distance learning, they still have access to due
Right.
process.
We will
Then
still
that
strive to ensure
satisfies
due
that
process.
requirement.
Yeah, I think that's right. Good
Right.
enough, right?
The timelines associated with the due process shall be
Shall be processed. I mean,
shall be processed by the state process officer. Like,
I feel like we're good.
moving on, moving on, moving on.
All right.
The humor.
Communication. So I think we are doing a lot of wordsmithing, and I don't think that we're going to get through this. I know you've a hard stop at 10:15.
I do.
Right. And we definitely want to get back to face coverings. We actually said that we were going to get into 3,000 in the agenda and then go face coverings. I think
not today. No.
we'll take a beat. I can tell everybody where we're at, show us the page, and then we can move on.
Yeah.
But so the districts,
Appropriate information through a variety of communication channels. Stop M.
Fine.
Yeah. Period. Like the direction at the bottom is unnecessary.
appropriate information through a variety of communication.
Communication channels.
Okay. Okay.
Do you want to flip to masks now and then flip back to this if you?
Can you give us a brief view of how much is left on this, just so we know?
So we are here. And if you look at the scroll bar, that's 3 of 5. We have, so last
Oh.
page, 5 is non-existent, 4 is not too bad. It's a bunch of, so we're actually not that far away. We got a page and a half to do. Okay. We could get face masks, right? And then come back to that. That's right. That's fine with everybody.
Let's do face masks now, and then we can come back to this because we're going to need input on the special services side, and then we could wrap this up beginning of next Friday.
Yep. Okay. Here's the 3000 series. This is where we left off. We'll come back to this later. We'll come back next week, maybe. Okay. Face masks.
So
Stephanie, did you have specific
yeah.
items?
So I couldn't remember if we say anything about the medical exemptions here.
We do.
But it's
We
very
do.
vague.
Right. So, and I don't know whether this would inform any changes, but basically what we're being told is that we are making the process that will be required for parents to request the medical exemption much more comprehensive. And what we're being told is that if a child has a respiratory condition in particular that is so serious to require a mask exemption, then no doctor should be telling those parents that the kid should be in school, that the student basically shouldn't be at school. Of course, the district is not going to say. But the point is that our medical advisors are going to create a cover sheet that will be sent to all parents with an attached form that we're developing where they have to, where a doctor would have to state that the exemption falls into one of the state approved categories and then provide documentation to substantiate that.
So we should
So,
just say that,
right.
exactly those words.
And so the situations that might require a student to wear a mask, to have a mask exemption are much more likely, frankly, to fall into a sensory issue, a dermatological issue. Those are the two main categories. It's really actually not a respiratory issue because controlled asthma, as an example, the student should be wearing a mask. And if it's uncontrolled and there are other serious concerns, the student, from a medical point of view, would really be at risk being in the school environment. That's the medical point of view. So the point is that we're reviewing that, that we will create a form. It will require a physician to substantiate the bona fide medical condition.
And John, before you get too deep
Yep.
in typing, we should probably
Yep.
find a way to track or redline this against the version that was provided to the boards in the first instance so that everyone can see what the changes are.
Yep. We'll just do one of these guys, I think. Yeah. Or, you know what? Red is bad. We're going to make it good. We'll make it green. But a version of green.
That's hard to
Have that
read.
green, please.
A version
I
that
know.
you can see.
I'm working. All right. Fine. All right. What are we calling the form?
The medical exemption. Request for medical exemption.
Or will what?
Will be made available to
And-
parents and will require that the medical condition falls into one of the state, the categories set forth by the state.
Do we want to create that box if this is going to apply to future potential health issues or health? If the superintendent turns this policy on 3 years from now, do we want to be bound by what the state says if the state's saying nothing at that time?
That's a good point. So then you could go back to that the exemption will be substantiated with a physician's, I don't know what we want to call it.
I think we can do this on a now basis, in part because we as a policy committee have said that we're going to review these items sort of semi-annually, quarterly, or whatever, and this one would just get an asterisk.
Categories, could we just say categories informed by state and local health officials?
Sure, but I do think for now, the parents need the more specificity, right?
Like what they
Well,
are?
doesn't that come with the reopening plan itself?
It is in the
Good.
reopening plan.
Okay, good.
I mean, I will say that the state categories in some ways are a little bit ridiculous. I mean, to say that my child is unconscious and therefore should have a mask exemption.
I think we have.
But
a
they better do
temporary-
well on those standardized tests. They better do well.
Okay. Does this cover it?
No, it's more than that. It's the substantiation from the
So that part would be here. A written notification from a physician is required. And I think we're replacing that with a,
right. So I think what we're trying to get at here is that it's not okay for the physician to simply send
right.
the
Any
RX
note.
note or just says so-and-so is under my care and qualifies for a mask exemption. We need
Right. The form shall require that a medical professional
substantiates
certify
certifies
a
the,
qualifying condition.
That's right.
what our medical advisor is saying is that the mask exemption should simply be very, very rare.
The
existence of a qualifying medical condition.
the existence. Thank you. Okay. And then mask or face covering should it feels like this should be
Gone.
mask or face covering, it should be after this, right?
Right.
Right. I think it's basically instead of this sentence here.
Right. Like that's the introductory sentence. That there is an exception or exemption, and this is the exemption.
Right. Form shall require that a medical professional certifies the existence of a qualifying medical condition. Okay.
And then are we including the process as to who is reviewing those and certifying that they're, and I was intentionally vague about what medical professional means,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we want to provide any greater specificity.
Well, yeah. Are we saying
I don't know
mom's
that
a
you do,
nurse?
because there are probably a number of special education situations where it's not necessarily a general practitioner.
Right.
Mhm.
But are we also saying that if mom is a nurse, mom feels entitled to sign a thing that says Timmy doesn't need to wear a mask?
It has to, I mean, from what I'm being told, it should include a diagnosis of a qualifying condition.
Are we saying then that the medical professional should be sort of,
I would say, can we say that that the student is under the care of the qualifying medical condition? So you're not just going to dial a doctor.
yeah. Is there anything about the sort of that the medical professional is qualified to make that assessment?
How are you gonna explain qualified?
Right. You're just throwing in qualified just to try to make it sound more beefed up at that point.
Well, but I think
You
it's
could say
also,
existence of a qualifying medical condition and that the student is under that individual's care.
Yeah, I think under the current care makes good sense.
That
Because
would be
the
the end of the
example that's been
sentence.
thrown out a
the
number of
medical
times
professional
that the
certifies
student
these
who's
as
had,
qualified.
oh, sorry, the student that's had one asthma attack, for instance, wouldn't really qualify.
Okay.
Under
Form
his
shall
or her
require-
care.
I'm sorry.
All I said was under his or her care, for which the student is under his or her care.
Or under the medical
And
professional's care.
continuing care.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this whole next paragraph would go.
Yes.
Yeah, this was the second part of the statement before.
Mhm.
Okay.
Should we be redlining those so
Yes.
people see what we took out?
Yes. Oh my.
Is there a track change in Google Forms? It should be.
There is, yeah, there is. I'll look at better ways to present this.
Where's the strike through in Google Forms?
Yeah, it's somewhere.
It's somewhere nested in
find it.
something.
I'll find it someday. Okay. Is there anything else that we wanted to add here? Because I think we might be able to make it through. We have 10 minutes. I think we might be able to make it through the other document.
I think the other comment that we received on the face mask policy is to make sure that the policy gets to sort of close weaves or appropriate fabrics. And I don't know if we want to look back at the definitions here Because I know that feedback came from looking at the policy, or whether we want to continue to defer that to the operational administrative piece and the specific design requirements.
It may or may not.
You
Stephanie's
could say
input
a
on this
close
one.
weave cloth, comma, or something.
I think we say right here, the administration may
Or
promulgate
just leave it with the
specific design
guidelines.
requirements.
Yeah,
cover
I
it.
think you have
I think
to,
that just needs to be, communicated effectively, that, we're not trying to suggest that you can work around the policy. We're trying
Right.
to give the administration broad discretion to tighten guidelines as necessary.
I'll make
right,
it bold.
because otherwise you're going to get into, I mean, people are, I mean, well-intended people are going to send us pictures of masks and say, is
Yeah.
this crochet okay? Or
Oh, boy.
No.
I saw a guy with a mask yesterday that was one of those gator things you pull up that had 3 vent holes right by the mouth. I said, that's not helpful. It's like,
Yeah. Okay. So can we pivot back?
yes.
See if we can get through the remaining page and a half, because I think our timelines. Okay. Okay. Staff responsibilities. Maureen, you had some notes here?
Well, you need to, I was questioning, at that point, there was a lot of parent pushback that we needed to move to and be planning for sort of synchronous learning. And I questioned whether or not some of this language was really not built for that. I don't know that my comments are entirely relevant in light of how things have developed with the 3 systems that, the all in, the all out.
Through
right.
email,
And of course,
online.
we are working out the details of this with our teacher associations, but I think it's everyone's goal to have, to clarify the expectations of time and schedule for students and staff, so that it's not, that we're moving away from the opportunity to, and get into the expectation that you will.
Correct.
So, however we can say that without getting into the exact detail of what that will entail is helpful. So to be available,
it seems odd to say through email and online between,
right.
It seems like to be available for corresponding with students and
Well, if you go back to the consistent wording, do you want to say something, because back in your distance learning definition, you said will engage in
Right.
da, 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 da. Could you say the same thing?
I think we could, but I don't think that we need to repeat it if we intend to say the exact same thing.
Well, but this is
What do we
specific
gain
to the
here
staff
besides saying we
responsibility.
expect the people who work for us to do the thing that carries out the policy? We don't say that in any other
Right.
policy.
Yeah, it's a little
Chris
weird.
is right. Chris
Yeah.
is right.
It's weird.
Like, we expect the staff to help make sure the lunch line moves is not a policy.
Right. Paraprofessionals will receive instruction from the appropriate supervisor of special services and are what?
I kind of
Why
think
is
the whole
that here?
section goes.
Yeah, why
I
is
do
this here?
too. I do too. I think it goes.
Good. Gwen, did we lose Gwen?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, thank you. Gwen, you were comfortable with that as well? I didn't
Yeah.
have your video
Yeah.
on my screen. All right. Okay. Good. We have 5 minutes. And I think we have monitoring student engagement. Okay.
Can you scroll down a little bit more, John, so we
Yes.
can see what in order to monitor student engagement?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yep.
And then what is this?
Yeah, so is monitoring student engagement about student expectations? Which I think that we're going to detail
That's correct.
in our school level
Yep.
schedules and
This doesn't belong in here.
I think
they're
kind of
supposed to.
the aspirational section of paragraph 12 that basically says we care about engagement, it's probably fine because it signals that it's important to everybody involved that this doesn't just become a thing that everyone goes to their corners and does whatever they need to. We're going to continue this channel of communication. But once you get into how we're going to do it,
This
Could
is,
you take out, yeah,
I
could you
agree.
just take out the term monitoring? Can you just call it student engagement?
yeah, yes,
yeah,
please. And then I think this paragraph is fine and everything after it is
it's
unnecessary.
probably unnecessary.
Yep. I mean, it's all good ideas. It doesn't belong in the policy book.
Mhm.
And the grading, of course, this is
Right.
absolutely something that we are having a lot of conversations about this, talking about, changing, as we've talked about at the high school, sort of changing the schedules, changing the typical grading periods, but it's all under discussion.
How about the alternative language? Or may approve the grading and reporting systems as developed, or the grading and reporting systems shall be developed by the administration and faculty.
Right. Or
So
any
is the
alternate
point here
grading
that-
program shall be determined by.
Is the point here that any sort of significant change in the grading system will be brought to the board? And does the board need to approve it, or is it just brought to the board for
Right.
their?
That's the question I think that's
Yeah.
here is how involved are we going to be in sort of determining, yes, we're okay with pass fail.
I mean, let's think about it this way. In a circumstance where it wasn't due to a closure and we weren't
Right.
in distance learning,
Right.
if the administration said, you know what, I don't think letter grades make sense anymore, we're going to go to something else.
Right.
Would that be a board initiative or a board required change or not? And that's going to tell you what the answer to 12 is.
I think yes.
I think yes too. And if even if it wasn't, if that decision was made, it would certainly be a topic for the next board meeting.
Mhm.
Right, it talks to, I mean, to me, this is about sort of like, are we enhancing our practices, or are we making a substantial change that potentially is going to affect the students'
Right.
experience in the whole pre-K through 12 continuum?
I would further say that if we want to look at the suspension of policy document to say, here are the things that are acceptable to, like, look, you have discretion as superintendent to do this, 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 and this. I mean, this is kind of calling out, we're not giving you the discretion to change this without checking in first with the boards.
Mhm.
Right. Notwithstanding.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So if we say this first sentence is it adequate? The grading and reporting system shall be used to be used shall be developed by the administration and faculty and is subject to the approval of the superintendent. And here,
You can just say any changes to the grading and reporting systems that will be used shall be.
Agreed.
Mhm.
instead of and or board, we're saying and.
Yeah.
And period, done.
And then everything else goes.
That's right.
And then it
Right. And I think last year, like, it was triage. And this year we're saying we're going to have a little bit more lead time.
Right.
We're
Right.
going to
There's
plan
a-
for this.
there's
We're going
a
to have a board
thoughtful
meeting.
piece
Yeah.
of it. Yeah.
Right.
Look at that. It's 10:14.
Yep.
Okay. Do we need a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, wait. I think we
Hold
need a motion to
Public
move
comment.
this to first reading with the boards.
So moved.
Second.
Good. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay. Move.
Public
motion-
comment and yeah, is there
Wait,
public
move
still
to
there?
move face coverings,
Yes.
revisions. All in favor?
Aye.
I
Okay. Public comment? Okay, board member comment? Motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
We're adjourned at 10:15.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
You
You too.
too.
Bye.